All right, welcome everybody to another Monday for our mindfulness practice. Great to see you all once again. Arriving into the present moment, letting all of the thoughts and feelings and concerns about the past or the future fall away now. Taking another breath with awareness to bring ourselves even more fully into this present moment. This precious time where we can be together, support each other in our practice of cultivating awareness and compassion for ourselves and others. And smiling. Don't forget about the smile. Thich Nhat Hanh always talked about the smile and how it's a practice it's part of the practice to remember to smile. Because if we, just get so burdened by all the difficult, heavy things that are always going on all the time, we will just go under. So even if we don't feel like it, we practice smiling. And you notice all the Buddha statues, like that one there, has this little smile. I did a film once called Turning Prayer into Action with the 13 indigenous grandmothers. And one of the grandmothers from Brazil, Maria Alice, was talking about healing. And she said, you have to focus on the little healthy seed. The little healthy seed. And we always laugh about that and talk about it and remember what she said, because we forget that little healthy seed. And that's what we nurture. That's what we nourish if we want to heal and transform. So anyway, last week we did talk a bit about the practice of Tonglen, which is a practice of taking and sending. That's the definition of Tonglen. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this because it's a deeply important practice. And what I started with last week is talking about how it is cultivated on the breath, which is the basis of the practice of mindfulness that we do. So there's a connection there, using the breath, which is such a powerful tool that we have access to all the time. And yet, the practice of Tonglen is a challenging practice to do. Whereas the practice of mindfulness should be a way that we can just come back to ourselves, not make a big deal, refresh, heal, calm everything down. The practice of mindfulness is synonymous with the practice of calm abiding. We have to have that as our basis for any kind of practice of transformation. But there's a lot to transform. And when we actually really do take to the practice and find ourselves on the path, we begin to realize that there are habits and patterns within us that keep us going around and around and around in samsara, in the cyclic existence of suffering. And many of those patterns are so habitual where we don't even realize they're happening. And it's when we get triggered that suddenly we're face to face with our stuff. And we realize, oh, I better do some more work on myself. So that is sort of naturally what happens when we practice, and we come back over and over into the present moment, and then we start to come up against our own stuff. And so meditation and this path of awakening is not necessarily for the light, those, how shall I say this? I was going to say the light-hearted, but that doesn't feel like what I want to say. It takes courage. It takes courage to be here and to keep showing up because of what can arise, you know, for us to look at. So the practice of Tonglen, this Tonglen means to take and to send. It means to exchange. And it happens on the breath, and we breathe in and out, sending or sending and receiving or taking. Exchanging happiness and suffering. And making ourselves and others equal. So we exchange our own happiness for other people's suffering. And this goes against our habitual pattern of wanting to hold on to our happiness and push away suffering, whether our own or others. But this is a practice. It's a practice to reverse the habitual way in which we relate to the world. So we shouldn't really think of ourselves as being very noble when we do this practice, like we're being such great practitioners and people to take on the suffering of others and give our own goodness away. Actually, what we're doing is we're dealing with our own shit. We're dealing with our own stuff by reversing and exchanging this incredibly insistent sense of self-importance with caring for others. And it's that friction that we feel in ourselves when we do this as a practice that is where the real work is. Are you with me? Okay, good. So, pleasant or unpleasant? These are just experiences. There was a Zen teacher from Korea I met early on in my Dharma life who said, good luck, bad luck, who knows? So pleasant or unpleasant, attraction and aversion. These are notions that are based on this sense of self. And the intention here in Tonglen is to undermine this habit of putting me first. Me, me, me. I, me, mine. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Everything me, 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 me. And oh, that is such a beautiful thing. I want that. It's so pleasant. Oh, it feels so good. And oh, that is awful. Let's get rid of it right now. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And you notice in the practice of meditation, slowly, slowly, being able to recognize these as they're just experiences. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? Attraction, aversion, pleasant, unpleasant. They are just arising experiences. One day it's going to be really beautiful. The next day it's going to be just a horrible nightmare, and you don't know what it's going to be. So the practice is to be with all of those without clinging to either one or the other. So we do this exchange over and over again with self and other, and we become aware of the resistance that we have to taking in suffering and giving away our beauty and our good fortune and all that, you know, we've worked so hard to get. And we face into our resistance, because what's happening is that we're breaking down this sense of self, this identification with a sense of self, which is what is elevated above everything else. Our effort in our lives is to maintain our identity and our self-image at all costs. It's a privileged attitude about me that comes first, always. And this is the place, if there is one place to put your focus in your meditation practice, it's on breaking down this sense of self, this illusion of a sense of self. Because what is it anyway? Who am I? What's the difference between where do I leave off and you begin anyway? Who is this? Who is this? Did you ever see the film, what was it called in Australia? The Last Wave by Peter Weir? Do you remember there was an Aboriginal elder who had a lot of knowledge, and there was a scene where Richard Chamberlain, who's this sort of, he's a lawyer, he's from the, oh God, what I got myself into a whole story here. He goes in to see this elder, and the elder is sitting there going, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? I mean, that's all he says. Who are you? And it just breaks that character's identification with his whole reality apart. And everything starts opening up into the dreaming. Anyway, it's a great film, but that's what we're talking about. And so Tonglen teaches us this taking and sending, exchanging self and others, to release this sense of self as the organizing principle of our lives. And so then if we think of ourselves as superior, Elizabeth Christine wrote me something about this earlier today. In the practice of Tonglen, we learn to open our hearts to the difficulties of others, and we see ourselves in a different light. And if we see ourselves as inferior, which many of us do, we learn through this practice to acknowledge our own happiness and abilities that we're not always in touch with, but we have to call them up, and we have to get in touch with them, and we have to give them. So it brings balance in those ways. But I'm just going to jump around a little bit. If we're focusing our attention on someone who's, say, dying of cancer or COVID, and our own fear of dying of cancer or COVID comes up and we get triggered, then we turn our attention to ourself, and we open to our own fears of that very thing. So again, it turns it around. We're not trying to get away from anything. We're also not trying to transform the suffering of others into happiness. We're experiencing what is. We're experiencing the suffering of others for them, but the taking and the sending transforms us, not them. And as we work with ourselves in this way, our compassion is born. This friction works on us to get us in touch with something so much deeper, so much bigger than ourselves. Those little selves that just get in the way all the time. They want everything to be a certain way for my own benefit. But that friction, that difficult task of facing into this part of ourselves allows for something else to happen. And that compassion, that innate compassion is born. And from that we can naturally be of benefit to others. So the way that we begin is we begin with mindfulness. We begin with 5 or 10 or 15 minutes of just mindfulness practice, breathing in and breathing out, just settling down, finding that place of calm abiding, resting awareness right there, relaxing, letting go, entering the present moment, the only moment. Breathing in and breathing out. And once we begin to feel stable and calm in that place, without doing anything, but we sense that stability and that calm, we call up our love and our compassion and our wish to be of benefit to others, which is part of our motivation in this practice. And from that place of being in touch with that wish, then we start the practice of Tonglen, of exchanging self and other, of calling up the suffering of others and sending our happiness to them, our healing. And we can start with one person, as we said last week, one person that we love a lot or we care about a lot. You can practice with one person that we're neutral about. And we can practice also with someone we have a really hard time with. And that's a powerful thing to do. But we can also just go into a group, say, of people who are homeless, maybe, or who are suffering from COVID, whatever happens to be up. And then gradually open and include all beings who are suffering in that same way. And we breathe in this pain and suffering, and we breathe out the happiness and the relief of that suffering. And we see the suffering coming in like a kind of smoky, heavy, dark, almost like tar coming in. And it comes into our hearts, and we feel it. And when it gets there, then we send it out. We send out this happiness and good fortune and loving kindness, compassion, whatever it is. And we imagine that like a clear, radiant light, like moonlight, going out, cool like moonlight, radiating out. So this is coming in and going out on the breath. And so, again, it's reversing the habitual tendency to want to take in that beautiful white moonlight and feel good, and reject that horrible, awful, heavy, shitty stuff that's going on everywhere. So you can think about pangs of hunger, discomfort of disease, sadness of loss, stab of rejection, feelings of failure, the shock of betrayal, homelessness, loneliness, violence, illness, these things that take so many forms. And you can also think about health and intelligence and food on the table and care and affection of your partner if you have one, the vigor in your body to whatever extent it's there, the enjoyment of the things that you have around you, your clothing, your jewelry, little things. It's like there's nothing too small to give, to send out, to bring relief. But you don't have to match the breath with the visualization. That would be exhausting. So just let it come in and out, resting with the breath. And then at the end, and if you get stuck, then you turn it towards yourself. Send that relief of suffering to yourself. And to all, then, eventually all who are suffering the same way you do. And then at the end, just let go and rest in awareness. Don't do anything. It's not about fixing it. You just notice what the thoughts and feelings are that arise. Notice the rhythm and the nature of the breath. How is it different when we're just doing simple mindfulness practice versus practicing taking and sending? Let the breath settle down again. It's so profound. And this place of self-clinging is so insidious. It rules the roost, this ego clinging. And we see, we begin to see how it is operating all the time, separating us from our experience and from each other. But when, after some time, we do this, we begin to have a taste of that sense of being empty of a separately existing self. And then we can experience just simply what is, without that filter separating us from everything. And the compassion is a natural expression of this awareness. So when emptiness, the sense of being empty of a separately existing self, and compassion come together, any concern for maintaining that separate self just falls away. And we realize our self-clinging is the source of our suffering. It is what gets us into trouble every time. But when this compassion arises from that place of being empty of a separate self, that's when bodhicitta is born. The bodhicitta is the heart and mind of awakening, to be of benefit to all beings, knowing that we are inseparable. There is no separation. that was it then. So let's, with all of this, it's like with the Dharma, with these teachings, we just take it in, receive it, and trust that it will settle in the way that it's supposed to. You don't have to do anything with it. You will know, what the next step is. And little pieces will come to you like, aha, oh yeah, that's what that was about. So come back to the breath. That's it, just come back to the breath. The breath of life, the breath that connects us to the web of life, to Gaia, to this beautiful, precious life that we've been given to wake up and see what happens on the great adventure of a lifetime. All right. So if you have the opening verses, please turn to them, and I'm going to do the incense offering, and then we'll open the practice with the bell and sit and walk and sit again and come back to each other at the end.